good morning, good morning, good morning. This is day 2 of the Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach.
Good morning, good morning. My name is Barbara Shipley. I'm in the best job in the whole world. I get to be Chief Brand Officer at AARP. Some of you who are international may not have heard of AARP, but we are an organization for people 50 plus. We are an advocacy organization. We are a social mission organization. And you're going to learn a little bit more about us, but through the lens of what we do for inclusivity. And I am thrilled to be partnering with Getty Images, Rebecca Swift, and Jen Alexander, Digitas. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started.
Hi there, good morning. I'm Rebecca, and I'm the Global Head of Creative Insights at Getty Images. We work across all age groups, but as I've gone on in my career, I've become more interested in the visualization of aging, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Hey everyone, I am Jen Andrews. I'm an SVP of Experience Design at Digitas in New York. And experience design means a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, it just means the human is involved in all the design that we do. And I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you, Jen. So we've been at this for a couple of years at AARP, and what you see here is a whole backdrop, literally and figuratively, around shaping a new image of aging. And the reason why we love coming to events like this, and many thanks to Inkwell and all the partners, is because age must become an element of diversity. And today it is not. We want to make the same kind of progress that other elements of diversity have done. And when you look at the creative industry, which is the reason why AARP comes to Cannes and comes to Adweek and comes to South by Southwest, is because the creative industry hasn't quite kept up. And there are still there's too much reliance on outdated stereotypes, cliches, the way aging used to be portrayed. And we really need this industry, the creators, the people who are putting out all that wonderful marketing and communications work to truly understand what the realities of aging are today all around the world. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. And I think what you'll also appreciate is that our approach to this is not to point out brands that aren't getting it right, but to celebrate the brands that are. And there are a lot of brands that are getting it right. And you're going to start seeing it, and maybe after today's conversation, you'll start thinking about the work you see a little bit differently when people are showing older people, people in their 50s, people in their 60s, 70s, the fastest growing segment in the US today. Anybody want to take a guess on the fastest growing segment? Is people over 85. Half of today's people 65 are still working. So you're going back to your creative rooms, you're going back to your briefs, you're going back to your casting, and you're thinking, oh, that 65-year-old person, that 60-year-old person, they're retired, they're walking on the beach, they're playing golf, they're feebly trying to handle their technology. Get all that out of your minds, that none of that is really true. So let's take a walk and figure out what it is we're trying to express today. This is a long-term project that we've done. We've been at it for several years, and we're really grateful to a lot of our partners. One of the things that we really like people to appreciate around the 50 plus, and you know this, you get it, but it isn't quite yet always translating into the work, is let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the sheer buying power, the economic contribution that people over 50 make in sectors all around the world. And we like to say that aging is fueling economies around the world. So this love affair that we have with youth, which we all appreciate and we love, but it is giving our business a bit of a blind spot. And as we say, that blind spot is just going to keep getting bigger because the planet is continuing to age. So here are some statistics about the economic impact that you see from this 50 plus audience. And this is not in the United States, this is around the world. You're talking about trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars that people over 50 are buying iPhones, other kinds of phones, sorry, not just iPhones, all kinds of phones, cars, vacations. They're not just buying healthcare. And the population is continuing to drive this massive perception or spending power. It's 9 o'clock for me too. So one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is that they're spending so much money. They really want to be heard. They want to be recognized. It's actually, we hear this from an AARP standpoint. They know that we are an advocacy organization and we help them with their money and their health, and if they ever do retire, that we can help them with their retiring. But they also see us an organization that can actually change the environment of how they're portrayed in a really interesting and important part of popular culture, which is the advertising industry. So when you look at some of this data, when you think about the massive spending power and the sheer size of the population and the impact they have on sectors all around the country and around the world, look at some of these statistics. Media is ageist. Their lives are based on outdated stereotypes. There are assumptions made about their lifestyles that maybe were true 20 or 30 years ago that simply are not true anymore. And let's hear it for the women who we all know drive everything. They are really, really feeling like they would consider switching brands when they recognize that brands are not getting them right. So all of the different industry outreach that we do, working with a lot of different organizations that truly represent and recognize the power of this audience. And what we also ask people to do when we think about inclusivity and diversity, the audience will get that you understand them when the people making the work are part of that audience. So we aren't sitting here telling you or asking you, please, please, please just hire the older guy or older gal. It's build multi-generational teams. And you're doing this already. I'm sure you're doing this already, but really be intentional, like every other aspect of diversity and inclusion, is think about the teams that we're building and give everybody that permission and that voice at the table, and I promise you the work will get a lot better. So I want to turn it over to our friends at Getty Images and start asking a few questions. Thank you for the opening. A couple of years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, 5 years, yeah.
We did something very exciting for us and something that we love at Getty Images, really brings the soul of their brand forward with a lot of these signature collections that they do. And we launched a signature collection called Disrupt Aging. Put it in your phones now. Disrupt Aging. And the great thing about it is it truly is capturing the stories of aging. And it's stories. There is nothing homogenous about this audience. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people around the planet. How could we possibly say that here is the story of aging? There are as many stories as there are people. And we love how Getty Images has sort of brought the creator community, the photographers, and really helped us up our game and made us think about things differently in terms of how we get the best work so that you can get the best work.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, coincidentally, when we were talking to AARP, and interestingly, you know, I'm based in the UK, and we don't have a similar organisation in Europe that really thinks about the older members of the population. We have charities who take care of older people, but we don't have an organisation like AARP. So it was really eye-opening to me to be involved with such an organisation. But we'd done some research. We had looked across the web at how images that featured older people were constructed and what they looked like. And we found that the over 60s were more likely to be seen alone. They were more likely to be seen sitting down than any other age group. I must admit that that's quite attractive now. It's getting more attractive. But the thing that really struck me at the time was they were less likely to be showing joy or happiness. So, you know, the vision of aging was very much this kind of isolated, lonely, sad-looking individuals sitting in their chairs. So we already had this kind of notion of what we wanted to break. And I think working with AARP has allowed us to really get in and really understand, lifestyles, demographic, the breakdown of the older generation. And when I started in the industry in my early 20s, we talked about the over 40s as this entire group. So 40 plus to 100 was just one demographic. And I remember, having conversations about this age group as if they were an alien life form that, you didn't quite understand them and, who were these strange creatures. And then as you kind of move into that age group, you realize, oh, actually, I want to be depicted in exactly the same way as I would have done in my 20s. And so, what we've been trying to do over time is kind of evolve that visual language and bring more of the color. The other thing that got me when we started looking at this is how clinical imagery of older people looks. There's a lot of beige, there's a lot of pale colors. Here we go. This blue is very popular amongst the elder generation, and it's almost like as you age, you become grey, both in your hair color and in your clothing choices. So color and vibrancy and vitality was really important to us in terms of how we were going to create this imagery. The other thing that anyone who's tried to shoot this age group has probably found. They don't want to be photographed. They don't want to be in images. It's not like the younger generation who are really keen to be visualized.
I mean, if you didn't take a picture of it, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Right?
So you don't see as many images out there in social media than you might do for the younger generations. Also, this group have plenty of money, as Barbara said. We can't even persuade them to be shot by giving them money. So, we have to kind of rely on friends and family and casting calls. And actually what we found is creating this collection, working on this project, talking about what we're trying to do with the Disrupt Aging collection has meant that we have brought more people to our contributors and to our creators. And we've, as a result, been able to improve the visualization of aging.
So Jen, why don't you bring in the sort of the agency mindset? I know that you work at the intersection of a lot of different areas around technology. We absolutely have to have conversations around technology when we think about this group. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and who you think is getting it right and we should be emulating.
Yeah, first of all, when my friends at Getty Images invited me to this panel, they were like, well, it's about aging. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about aging. That's not what I talk about. And then I stepped back and I was like, I'm a 50-plus creative working in the ad industry. I know a lot about aging, right? I have a lot of experience with that. So yeah, technology. I mean, I think I always look to sort of Japan right now, honestly, because it's such a super aging society. I think 30% of the population there is over 65. Right, so they're ahead of the curve, right? And so we really need to look to them. So I actually study a lot of technology that comes out of Japan, like mobile apps and whatnot, a lot of AI sort of powered apps. I'm not answering your question whatsoever.
It's really okay. It's really okay. But because we had some really interesting conversations about some of the different sectors and brands and categories that are really starting to embrace this. And I will tell you that when we travel around and we start to talk to folks, and you talk about being a 50-plus creative, I mean, one of the things that I have seen just in the last couple of years of coming to Cannes is it's more personal now. I mean, if you are or are planning to be, is anybody planning to be a 50-plus creative? Everybody raise your hand. Right, you don't want to leave the industry. You don't want to turn 50 and have everybody say, okay, well, we're not going to invite John to the meeting anymore because he doesn't have anything to add. Everybody wants to maintain, or maybe you want to move and deepen your career, but it's gotten so much more personal. How can this be the picture of who we are? I mean, they're perfectly lovely people, but all these other pictures are the pictures of really who we are, and this is how we really want to be portrayed. We want to be shown in multi-generational settings. Rebecca said something interesting about how people are usually shown alone. If they're not shown alone, they're shown with other older people, when in fact, this is how people are actually living their lives. At work, maybe at the cafe. This is how people are living their lives. And when you think about how we sort of rely on some of those stereotypes, because they're easier, because we can fast track the work, right? So if you're ever thinking about doing something, let's say you're marketing a restaurant chain, and you're doing your casting, where are the older people? Let's all be honest with ourselves. The older people are background. Now actually walk into a restaurant and look around. Where are the older people? They're everywhere. And they're not just the background. And they're not just sitting with other older people. So it's about getting it right because it's getting it real.
Yeah, and I really love the idea of multi-generational teams. I think on my team right now, we just got an intern. So they are maybe 22. And then we span 4 generations. Like, can you believe that? There are 4 generations in the workplace right now. So, you know, when it comes to image selection, I love that I'm 50 plus because I've looked at so many different life stages that I can kind of discern that images are very authentic. So I'm super glad that my team has me right now to kind of, you know, assess situations. So I'm really, really glad for the Disrupting Aging collection too. I use it all the time.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. And you said something really important about life stage. And we know how to do this. We've gotten good at this. We've gotten good at thinking about people not just based on age, age, zip code. Those don't tell us anything. And when we look at the aging community, and if you're lucky, you're aging, right? Because the alternative sucks. But if you think about age as the one data point you have about somebody, and you think you're going to build a whole campaign or a whole knowledge base around them, we're missing 99% about that person. So let's look at this woman here, the older woman. She's in a life stage where she's working, she's building her career, she's probably still thinking about her what's next. Whereas we may, if we chopped off the younger woman, we may look at this woman and think, oh, she must be talking to her doctor. She's a patient. She has frailty. And now when you look at this picture in its current state, you see people at work, connecting, learning from each other, and making their best work. And I think that's what's so great about the imagery and the way stories tell such great imagery. Jen, so tell us a little bit, you were thinking about the connections with technology, and how can we bring technology into this conversation?
Wow. Okay, that's a big one. So I think bringing technology into the conversation really has to do with continuous learning, right? And I think when you are staffing multi-generational teams, definitely having someone that looks at technology through the lens of being an older adult, right? And you do need a little bit bigger buttons sometimes. You need a larger font size. And I think, you know, accessibility plays into it as well, not just for people with disabilities, but also people that are using sort of accessibility tools, right, on an iPhone, say, or an Android. And so I think it's quite important to, you know, really have older people on your teams, right, to assess the technology that's being put out.
Yeah, and you know, we have a big presence at CES. We have brought age tech to the fore and work with great partners, many of whom are here. And one of my favorite stories, and this is so obvious, it was years ago, not that many years ago, we were looking at, with some of the companies, we were looking at the television remote. Remember the older, maybe not even that old, think about the television remote. You probably have the Apple with that very sleek, you know, remote. But think about the older television remote. And there are like 55 buttons on that thing. And how many do you use? Like 3. And nobody liked that television remote. So it kind of started with this idea of how do we make a remote that's really good for older people? And guess who liked it? Everybody. So everybody likes the advances that can be realized when we make things that are easier for older people. Because who likes things that are really complicated? Who wants their tech to be complicated? Raise your hand if you really like complicated technology to use. Nobody does. So the idea that we can actually make all the products better and that they can be so much more universal, because you are going, the likelihood that you will live to be 100 gets higher every year. And you want this stuff to work for you. And you know your customers do too. So I know we have some work loaded into this. Just pictures, look at that, isn't that lovely? Let's celebrate people enjoying their families. I think that, you know, Getty Images has done some really good research on the different, Rebecca has talked about some of the different ways that people are seen in their imagery. They're rarely shown with a business, but we know that they are in business. The smartphones. Okay, so let's see if we can make this work. Is this one of the pieces of work that we've loaded?
Yeah. So when we were chatting before the panel a couple of weeks ago, we were talking a lot about advertising, right? We're here at CAM. I work in advertising. I have a lifelong career in advertising. And I haven't really studied TV advertising through the lens of aging, right? So this was a pretty fun exercise for me. So I kind of dipped into YouTube and I researched a bunch of different sort of TV campaigns, a lot of TikToks that will show you. And I came up with sort of 3 really interesting examples of depiction of aging in a really authentic way. There are actually dozens more that I could have brought, but I really wanted to be representative of, different countries and sort of the way that, older adults are treated in different places. So this first one, I think you've seen before, especially if in the United States. So this is Jennifer Coolidge. She is 61. And this premiered during the Super Bowl, and I think it was a really, really engaging spot. I think this is a 40-second spot, and there are many different cut downs. What I love about this is she's really, really authentic. Not only is she gorgeous, she's really authentic to her comedy, right? And she showed up very authentically, right, in this piece. So, kudos to e.l.f., which is, probably a makeup brand that is intended to be for people in their 20s. And here she's showing up at 61, right, representing e.l.f. So I really, really enjoyed this one.
Well, and also the riding the wave of her popularity. White Lotus, anybody? So good. Who thought? I didn't think she was going to die.
Yeah, and the fact
I hope I didn't spoil it for anybody.
Yeah, and the fact that for a Super Bowl campaign, e.l.f. really put a lot of money behind her personality, and I just really, really love this spot. And for those of you, from the U.S. as well, I think Regina King also has been crushing it in sort of the Cadillac spots. She's a young, I think, 51, but she's really been showing up authentically, I think, in Cadillac spots as well. This one, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Airways. So this is sort of a group approach, right, to a campaign commercial, but there are little hints of older adults in here. I'm wondering if you can kind of see them as we go. They're quite unexpected, but you've got sort of older adults being part of that larger group. And there's a nice surprise at the very end if you just wait a minute. Love that. It's coming, I promise. Getting there. So I just love seeing older adults sort of traveling, maybe in economy, but they're also flying in business class, and they're just having that moment, like looking out the window like this woman and just, really living their authentic life. This is the part where you've got a female pilot, which I loved.
Yeah. And it's real. And there's also some great work, as you all know, being shown right over there in the Palais, even just this early on in Cannes, which I noticed yesterday, that it's just really respecting and celebrating people of all ages.
And then this one, we'll probably just click out of this in a minute, but this is from a Chinese telecom, and it tells a really beautiful story, I think, for Chinese New Year, just this past February. And what it is, it's a grandfather and a granddaughter. And normally you would see this sort of grandfather-granddaughter relationship depicted as sort of caregivers, right? This is very, very different. This is a grandfather that's on his phone every day making really fun videos, right, of all the people he meets every day. It's a beautiful 2-minute video. But, and the granddaughter's embarrassed by her grandfather. She's like, why are you on TikTok all the time? Why are you, putting all these videos out? But what I love about it is that the older person, I'm assuming he's maybe 70 or 80, is using technology on a daily basis, right, to represent his life. So I highly recommend watching this later. This is 2 minutes if you want to click out of it. Yeah, I think we can click out of this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next slide is my absolute favorite. If you want to just click each of them, they'll autoplay. So the Glamas in China. So this is a group of, I think, 60, 70 plus grandmothers who are just killing it on TikTok. Really, really engaging. Would love for you to follow them. And then there's a woman in the middle. Her name is Jim Tan, and she's a fashion influencer who's just really also crushing it on TikTok. And then Sonia Valencia on the right there, who's a makeup influencer who taught me a lot about makeup and not to follow the trend of 20-something and 30-something concealer as a triangle. Never do that when you're over 50. So yeah. So she'll teach you a lot of things. So this is just, an example of how people are not only being represented in television, they're also being represented on social media.
And Rebecca, when we talk, you talk a lot about a lot of the international work, and you kind of bring us such a good international perspective. What are some of the things that you and your team have found that are surprising about this work that we've done together, or the Disrupt Aging collection? Maybe some of the things you're hearing back from some of your photographers. How would you say that it sort of evolved over the last couple of years?
We're involved in a lot of conversations around diversity and equity and inclusion with brands who are trying to kind of rebuild their visual brands around more inclusivity. And to Jen's point, we actually found that the lens of aging is something that really connects globally in ways that other lenses of identity don't necessarily. And so, in Japan, as you quite rightly said, most of our conversations around inclusion are actually about the aging population, and a little bit about body shape and body type, but actually thinking about how we can better represent older Japanese people. So I think the most surprising thing to me is how incredibly successful this collection is. It is really popular across all industry verticals. It's really popular across all of the regions that we work in. And I think the last time we looked, it was nearly 20,000 businesses had used this content for their own visual communications. So we know we're doing the right thing. We've just got to keep shooting this content, and we've got to find more people who would be willing to be in the content, which is the key thing for us. But yeah, I think what surprised me the most, although it shouldn't have been a surprise, was how incredibly popular this stuff is.
Well, it really filled a gap, right?
Yeah.
It created a space, and by doing it, it helped us prompt exactly this kind of conversation, because the void was now filled. And that's why we call this Shaping a New Image of Aging. And I think the thing that's so great about it over the years is it's very dynamic. We've continued to change it. We've continued to add to it. And I think, Rebecca, one of the things that I loved most about when we launched this was you talking about how powerful it was for the photographers themselves. Because there was a lot of interest from the creators and the photographers who recognized how important it was to kind of get this story right, all these stories, and keep these stories going. There's a lot about our business and the influence that it has as sort of a leader in, if you want to call it, pop culture. But one of the things that we have also found, at AARP, we do a lot of research, a lot of thought leadership, and generationally, when younger generations see older people as feeble and frail and vulnerable and dotty and incapable, it makes them, younger generations, fear aging. And that is actually part of what we are trying to do here. This is not just about driving industries or helping older people feel more seen, even though that is absolutely the lion's share. We shouldn't be insulting or ignoring older people. I don't think anything about what you're seeing here is insulting or ignoring older people. But when millennials, Gen Z, get a whiff of this, it can absolutely shift their own mindset about not just the older people in their lives, but them getting older. And that is a big societal issue. We don't want people to fear aging. And there's a lot of reality about it. Yes, health issues do come into play. And yes, there is a lot of your dollars that go toward health care. But the reality is, it isn't the only story. And I loved what you just said, Rebecca. I was working with a major global brand, and they had come to us for essentially a little bit of consulting, which was kind of interesting. What they had come to us for was, how can we start to appeal to the mature audience? And I thought, well, first, don't call them that. But as we were talking, and this is a global brand with multiple products up and down the drugstore aisle, and I said to them, you've been talking to this audience their whole lives. You talked to them when they were children. You talked to them when they were having babies. You talked to them when their babies were getting older. They are not a zoo exhibition. They are not this foreign alien population. You already know them. Now just get to know the life stages that they're in. And it just really started to change. You could feel the conversation change. They haven't just landed on the planet. They've been here the whole time, and many of these marketers have been talking to them the whole time. So it's just fascinating to see people sort of get it and recognize it, especially as the creatives start to enter this, this age group. I'd love to know if there are any questions. Are there any thoughts? Do people have any of their own stories or their own realizations? No realizations? Anything that we talk a lot about what, when we come to Cannes and we think, okay, what might we do when we're back in the office on Monday or Tuesday, give ourselves an extra day. And all the tools that we need to bring to the table are also starting to change. So the Disrupt Aging collection is a big one.
Just go to the Getty Images site and write "Disrupt Aging Collection" in the search terms, and then whatever you're looking for, and you'll get the best of aging in your search results.
I don't think we loaded what my favorite image still is. There's this, I don't remember what country she was in. I think you've told me, but she's like a 58 or 59-year-old welder, and she's got her she's at work. I mean, these are so real, and she's got her welding helmet on, and you can sort of see her whitish blonde curls showing through, and she's just looking straight at the camera and sort of very real and very proud. And I love that image because she is so real. But there are other tools that we also can start bringing into the mix. We've talked about. And Jen, in your world, I mean, what are the kind of tools of the trade? The brief. When we think about how we put the brief together, that might change as a result of what we're talking about here. When we think about the audiences or the stories we're trying to tell or the way we might cast it, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you need multi-generational teams to really nail a brief. I just did a campaign for small business owners really recently. It was like a B2B campaign. And I selected all the images. I didn't sort of leave it to, my 20 and 30-year-old creatives. I actually selected all the images, and I ended up with a gray short-haired woman with a full sleeve of tattoos who was, running her own business. And that was from the Disrupting Aging collection too. And it passed through, clients loved it. It's going to be on billboards. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, that's right. And you taught something to this multi-generational team, which I'm sure you learn from every day too. So I think that's part of what's so exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it wasn't the brief of find someone 50 plus. It was like find a small business owner. And I just sort of reimagined what the small business owner looked like, right?
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And you based it on what's happening actually today instead of what might have been happening 20 or 30 years ago. And as entrepreneurs, older people are leading the way as entrepreneurs. So there's just so much, it's such a vibrant area. In addition to the brief, everything that we do around casting, everything we do around research. I mean, we ourselves are leading a lot of different conversations around how we do research, how we do polling, what kind of questions we ask, how we categorize people. And I have friends that I went to high school with who are retired, because I know them because I see them on Facebook and I watch their fabulous lives. And I think to myself, how the hell are you retired already? How did you do that? I don't want to retire, but if I did, I don't know how. And so all of a sudden, it makes me feel, and maybe them to me too, we are not living the same lives, and that's okay. But to a marketer, we are. Because we have a lot of the same very specific data points. Our ages, our zip codes, our race or ethnicity, but could we possibly be living more different lives? And I think getting down to that reality, which shouldn't be that hard, it shouldn't be that stunning a comment to make, but it really is, because there is this expectation that when you hit 55 or 60, we see it all the time with AARP. I mean, does anybody feel really lousy when the AARP letter comes? No. See, that's why I have a job, is because you feel a little bit lousy. But it's because, I can't tell you why you feel that way, but I know it's because AARP is sort of like, oh my God, wait, that's the organization for senior retired people. And admittedly, we do help senior retired people, and we're very proud of that. We're not going to stop doing that. But if you get the invitation at 50 and retirement could be 20 years away, if you're ever lucky enough to retire or want to retire. So it's also part of us being more relevant to people, and not just making our brand more relevant, but making the whole sector, the whole series of different segments more relevant to people. And I think that's really the bottom line. I would leave you with one short story about my mother, who's my hero. Everybody, raise your hand if your mother's your hero. So my mother was a bigwig in New York advertising when most women were in this steno pool. And she worked her way up, and famous in our business. And at the ripe old age of 62, when the big agency she was working at was bought by a slightly larger agency, they did what a lot of agencies did, and they cleaned house, and she was out. And I will never forget the absolute distress that she had, and what she left me with was, I just don't want my turn to be over. She had so much more to give to this industry. She was brilliant and smart and creative, and she was a big creative lead. And I think about that all the time. Of course, our mothers drive us, our fathers too, in a lot of what we do. But a lot of, for me personally, it's my mom that I'm doing a lot of this for, because I don't think anybody should feel like at 62 they're done because they're 62. And so this is a real passion play for a lot of us. And I hope you guys take this back. Jen, is there anything you would add?
I have a mom story too. I was not
Tell
prepared.
mom stories.
I was not prepared to talk about this. We did not plan this, but same deal. I think my mom was a journalist, and she worked until maybe 60, 65, and then was sort of booted out of her everyday journalism career. And she, was sad about it for a little bit. And then she just became a freelance journalist for a while. And then she ended up getting a government job, which was kind of wild at like 70. And she worked until she was 84. This is a little morbid, but like on the day that she passed, she sent a story into her editor, right? At 84 years old, right? So anything can happen.
That.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, till the day she passed, she was writing, which I find amazing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Rebecca, and I don't know.
No,
you don't have to tell a mom story.
No, well, the only mum story I have is my mum was one of the very early adopters of technology in the early 80s and learned how to code very, very early on, and built computers. And she's nearly 80 now, and she still builds websites and manages websites for businesses. And my brothers all took notice of coding when she started to learn, and they're all earning fortune in the technology industry, and I'm a creative. So take from that what you will. I went the other way. But no, I mean, she's still, I suppose you could call it freelancing at nearly 80. Yeah.
And I remember I said to my mom, well, let's put your book together and go do some nonprofits. She didn't need the money. I said, go help some nonprofits. And so she did. And then, I don't know, about 8 months later, she came back and she said, first of all, I feel a little bit silly. And second of all, and you'll appreciate this maybe generationally, some of you, she said, I feel like I'm taking work away from people who really need it, and I'm not going to do that. So she did volunteer work, but the point, think about the real stories of the real people that you know, and let that push through and let that shine through. And some of that $118 billion that the 50 plus are spending are going to be in your and your clients' pockets. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, come up here.
Come
on up.
Or just come closer. Oh, and by the way, millennials, any millennials in the room?
Yay.
You're going to start turning 50 in 7 years.
And
we'll invite you to join AARP. Yes.
I just want to shout out Adrian C. Smith, because she invited me in 2019 to come and lead meditation in the Mediterranean. I'm 76 years old.
Woo! Yay. Thank you.
And when I retired from 34 years in public education, I said I'd never work again. But 3 years ago, I had a part-time job at a timeshare. Last year, I was the community engagement manager part-time at the Museum of Martha's Vineyard, and I'll continue that career. I got elected to my school board in December.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And Adrian walks the walk.
And I feel like maybe a candidate for our Disrupt Aging collection.
Yeah, do you
You're
want to be in a
beautiful.
photo
Thank
shoot?
you. I saw you guys out there. Oh, that's
thank
great.
you.
There's a great commercial.
That's the aspiration.
And I couldn't even form a complete sentence when I first got up here. So, anything you guys would want to, you ladies would want to add?
No, please come and visit the collection at Disrupt Aging Collection on the Getty Images site. We are, seeing the success of the collection is encouraging our creators to create more, which is obviously the long-term plan for this work is to keep bringing new perspectives around aging to the global marketplace.
Jen?
Yeah, I would just say make sure you have older creatives on your team. I think we talk about diversity a lot, and diversity in age, I think, is really, really important on your creative team. So hire older creatives.
I love it. Let's let that be the last message. Thank you. Have a great camp.
Thank you.